Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our News Hour with the news. I'm Shifara Olako, and thank you for joining us. Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva has dismissed the report of the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia as more of a political statement than a human rights investigation. Speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, Ambassador Zennebe Kebede said the report is a document with an ill-intended move on the part of the experts. Kushumel So takes it from here.
The establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was therefore politically motivated. Following the release of the report, the government of Ethiopia has submitted a list of 100 main observations on the draft report and sent it to the President of Human Rights Council to be distributed to members of the council. The ambassador hinted that the Western powers were concording to suggest genocide and use humanitarian aid as an instrument of war in the joint investigation. Speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, Ambassador Zennebe Kebede said the report is a document with an ill-intended move on the part of the experts.
It was politically motivated. Commission of Human Rights Experts said they have contacted TPLF, and what we can understand from that is they simply received a dictation from the TPLF and put their report as an investigation. Rather, it is a political statement. From the outset, Ethiopia had opposed a resolution establishing the Experts Commission on Ethiopia last December 2021. This was because the establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was totally politically motivated.
Explaining why the government opposed the formation of the commission from the outset, Ambassador Zennebe explained that it was established to repeat what has already been done by the Joint Investigation Report of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the Office of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights into alleged human rights violation.
The findings of the Joint Investigation Team were submitted to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and the Council also endorsed it unanimously without any reservation as well as without any precondition. Recommendation of the JIT was finally submitted to the government of Ethiopia to conduct a criminal investigation and ensure accountability. The government accordingly established the Inter-Ministerial Task Force tasked with the implementation of the recommendations by the Joint Investigation Team. So all the investigations have been done by the JIT in a very full-fledged way. The establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was therefore politically motivated.
The ambassador finally called on the international community to act based on principles and international rules and stop meddling into the internal affairs of Ethiopia. The international community should stop undue pressure against Ethiopia, supporting the TPLF and stand by the government of Ethiopia. This government is illegitimate, fully supported and elected by the people, he pointed out.
Well, dear viewers, let's now turn our attention to trending stories over the past 24 hours. And I'm joined by my colleague Tigist Sarnisa, and she's going to share with us some of her observations, especially when it comes to the UN General Assembly. Welcome, Tigist.
Thank you so much.
So the UN General Assembly has, I think, entertained a host of issues, including those of Ethiopia. So can you walk me through some of the observations that you made?
One of my observations are Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Zennebe Kebede. They called the General Assembly how TPLF is trying to bring unconstitutional change of government, and we can take a look at some of the clips that what he was saying at the moment.
Okay.
Insurrectionist armed group that has endangered the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country, Ethiopia remains firmly committed to human rights. The insurrectionist group is clearly intent on reversing the political and economic reforms being implemented by the popularly elected government, and is trying to use violence to bring about unconstitutional change of government.
All right. So what's the central idea of what His Excellency said?
His Excellency, the Ambassador, further added that the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, the report is of substandard quality. That's what he's saying. We can listen to some of the clips.
All right. Okay.
The Commission has submitted a report of substandard quality. Its allegations are unsubstantiated and not meeting the standard of proof for such investigations. It has fallen prey to those well accustomed to deceiving bodies of this nature. The report fails to meet a modicum of objectivity, professionalism, and impartiality.
All
right. Tell me more, please, in this regard.
This is what has been shared on social media the past 24 hours, and then some people, most of the people say that they're friends of Ethiopia and pro-Ethiopia Twitter accounts have been saying that terrorist TPLF looted WFP warehouses, USAID fuel, and aid launched for the third time war, and defying the AU peace process using human wave child soldiers as farmers, fighters to starve the region intentionally. TPLF should be disarmed. That's what the most people were saying on social media the past 24 hours.
Okay, thank you, Tigist.
Thank you.
Moving on, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Demeke Mekonnen, met with Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the United Arab Emirates Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, on the sidelines of UNGA 77 in New York. Demeke emphasized that in order to further develop outcomes that are mutually advantageous, the two nations' relations should be scaled up. Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan acknowledged the opportunity for the two nations to strengthen their commercial and investment ties. He also noted the potential of the two countries to cement ties in trade and investment. Moving on, the report released by the UN Human Rights Experts Commission misrepresents Ethiopia's National Defense Force. The report is unsubstantiated and incoherent. The TPLF has been busy tarnishing the image of the Defense Force along with its Western media outlets. The report is self-contradictory and biased, failing to pay attention to the atrocities committed in Afar and Amhara regions, solely focusing on Tigray. For more on that, there is Goshumalsa.
The Ethiopian National Defense Force is well known for its peacekeeping mission in East Africa region and elsewhere in the world. Ethiopia has also been an ambassador of peace in East Africa. Branded for not kicking off any invasion of the territories of neighboring countries, Ethiopia has played considerable diplomatic and peacekeeping roles to ensure peace in the region. However, the terrorist TPLF has been busy tarnishing the image of this indomitable national defense force with its Western courts and media lies. In November 2020, the traitor TPLF backstabbed the National Defense Force, which safeguarded Tigray over 2 decades. In its divide and rule system, the group tried to put into ethnic line, but the National Defense Force remains stand to save its nation from invaders and aggressors. So far, the Defense Force is battling with the Trojan horse TPLF and mercenaries in various fronts. The terrorist TPLF has committed unspeakable atrocities on members of the National Defense Forces and civilians. The International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia report is agenda-driven and did not meet the UN investigation system and standards. According to the Interministerial Task Force to oversee human rights violations in northern Ethiopia, the report is not commensurate with the extent and the magnitude of the damage that have occurred in all the 3 regions, and it only shows a summary picture of the process, lacking impartiality and conducted in a way that puts the neutrality of the organization in jeopardy. The report is meant to discredit the National Defense Forces, Ethiopia's pride, and help the TPLF dodge accountability.
Now, families who lost their loved ones during the China massacre by the terrorist TPLF recounted heart-wrenching stories when approached by ETV. Residents of North Gondar zone in the state of Amhara portrayed the brutal killings of civilians during the aggression by the terrorist TPLF. It is to be recalled that the terrorist TPLF slaughtered over 200 civilians at Chena in August 2021. Shogai Mato has more on that.
Maria Abba is a resident of North Gondar Zone, Chena district. During the TPLF's aggression in August 2021, her husband and 2 children fell victims to the brutal carnage unleashed by Tigrayan invading force. Maria is still in a deep grief.
Dying in action may not be as shocking since it's a daring act. But we are talking here about unarmed, defenseless innocents falling victims to a brutal aggressor. The Tigrayan invading forces robbed out such people as priests and farmers. The level of savagery is indescribable.
Those who survived the brutal carnage have a lot more to recount. One such survivor is Balata Mogas, who witnessed the attack targeting Chena Takla Haymanos Church. Such programs and services as mass, prayer and healing came to a grinding halt after the attack.
The faithful were deeply saddened by the deaths of the priests, but they showed such admirable resolve to press ahead with church services. There is no mass service right now, and the graveyard is full to its brim.
These shocking atrocities unleashed by the Tigrayan invading force did not receive the attention they truly deserved in the trumped-up report by the international experts of human rights on Ethiopia. This attests to the fact that TPLF's Western courts will leave no stone unturned to help it dodge accountability.
The people of Tigray have been witnessing all sorts of shocking rights violations at the hand of the TPLF following the withdrawal of the Ethiopian Defense Force. Bent on dismembering the unity of the country at any cost, the TPLF has been making military preparations for more than 2 years. The director of the Bolzili School of International Affairs and professor of international security, Anne Fitzgerald, discloses that the TPLF is holding the people of Tigray as hostage in an apparent attempt to win international attention. Johannes Van Town has more on that.
Professor Anne Fitzgerald, who has done extensive research on the issue, said the terrorist TPLF passed an unconstitutional law in its tightly controlled territory of Tigray to help facilitate its terrorist activities. All this, according to Gerald, is happening at the expense of the people of Tigray. The professor, who conducted research by talking to citizens in various refugee camps and areas of Tigray, said that the people she talked to said that their lives are under threat.
Yes, at this camp in Jara, there were civilians of all different backgrounds. Those who had worked with the government shared with me the fact that their lives were under threat.
After brutally assaulting a federal army barrack in Mekelle back in November 2020, the TPLF retreated to the arid mountains of Temben up in the central Tigray. Members of this mafia group took shelter among the people, forcing residents to hide them and making it too daunting for the federal government to apprehend them. When the federal government declared a unilateral ceasefire in the hope of helping residents get a respite from the war, the TPLF rather maliciously used the situation for yet another round of warmongering. Following this, the group that returned to Mekelle from Temben Desert is said to have enacted a new dictatorial law on the people of Tigray.
There were new unconstitutional laws that were adopted immediately after the leaders came back from the Tembian region where they had been previously surrounded before the unilateral ceasefire was declared, because the war wasn't going anywhere, because civilians were being used. That's the characteristics of an insurgency, and the risk of civilian casualties was too high. The feedback that I received from both IDP camps was very definitive in saying that unconstitutional laws were introduced to incriminate anyone who had cooperated with, in any way, communicated with the federal government authorities.
It is the hope of many Ethiopians that the terrorist group, which is on a killing spree and on a downright path towards its Western allies, will be disarmed by the strenuous and patriotic efforts of the Ethiopian Defense Forces.
ገበሬው ማረስ አለበት። አስተማሪው ማስተማር አለበት፣ ነጋዴው መነገድ አለበት፣ ወታደር አገሩን መጠበቅ አለበት እንጂ ሁሉም ነገር ወደ አንድ ዳይሬክሽን ብቻ እንዲሄድ ካደረግን እንደ ሀገር መቆም አንችልም። ዘንድሮ ስንዴ ምንም ጥርጥር የለውም ኢትዮጵያ ኤክስፖርት አድርጋለች። መስራት ከቻል፣ መብላት ከቻል፣ መላክ ከቻል፣ በተቃራኒ ያለው መራብ ከጠፋ፣ ማስገባት ከቀነሰ፣ መሰደድ ከቀረ በኢትዮጵያውያን ሉዓላዊነት ላይ፣ በኢትዮጵያውያን ክብር ላይ፣ በኢትዮጵያውያን አንድነት ላይ ቀጥተኛ የሆነ ኢምፓክት አለው።
Welcome back. You are still watching Addis News Hour. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, EHRC, has advised the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia, ICHRWE, to adequately cover all affected populations and regions to fairly illustrate the situation in northern Ethiopia. In its report published on September 19, 2022, ICHRWE has admitted that it confined its investigation to Tigray and Amhara regions. The report also stated that remote investigation was carried out by the ICHREE in the case of Tigray and excluded the Afar region. Both Amhara and Afar regions were invaded by the terrorist TPLF. According to a statement issued by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, it underscored the need to exercise caution in the approach, which completely disregards the situation in an entire region in northern Ethiopia, and advised ICHRWE to adequately cover all affected populations and regions to fairly illustrate the situation in northern Ethiopia. It was noted that the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission further carried out extensive investigations on Afar and Amhara regions, on the humanitarian situation and airstrikes in Tigray, and arbitrary detentions under the state of emergency in Ethiopia, covering the period between June 2021 and March 2022. Some of the statements in the reports of the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia, which was set up without the agreement of the Ethiopian side, are unfair. House Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs Standing Committee Chair Dima Nago told European Union members of Parliament. The chair made the remark during the discussion held between European Union members of Parliament and Ethiopian Parliament Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs Standing Committee members. The EU Parliament delegation, led by Foreign Affairs Committee Chair David McAllister, and drawn from various standing committees, including Women, Rights and Gender Equality Development, took part in the discussion. On the occasion, Dima said the government believes some of the statements made by this body, which was set up without the agreement of the Ethiopian side, is unfair. He recalled that the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights jointly did an investigation on the group up to a certain point during the first round of the conflict in the northern part of the country, and they came up with a lot of recommendations. And the government of Ethiopia accepted those recommendations and even set up an inter-ministerial committee to implement the recommendations of this report, the chair noted.